Hi, good afternoon, everyone. But today we are going to go ahead and we're going to talk about the obligatory nature of India's 1991 reform. हमें पहले ये समझना है what is the meaning of obligatory nature and why they were obligatory in nature. Okay. Then we will be also talking about the different measures of economic reforms. So please write down. Obligatory nature of India's 1991 economic reform. Of India's 1991 economic reform. Okay. So, what do we mean by this? देखो, many countries they brought in the economic reforms. वो उन्हें liberalization, privatization, globalization शुरू तो किया. They brought in the economic reforms, but they were not obligated to do so. माने there was no compulsion, right? It was something which was voluntary in nature. कि ठीक है, हाँ, by choice we want to bring in the economic reforms. By choice हमें चाहिए that we have the we have liberalization or we have privatization. So it was by choice, many countries. However, in India that was not the case. In India it was involuntary. In India it was obligatory. माने we didn't have the money to anymore buy the imports from outside, right? We had severe balance of payment crisis. So there was a pressure from IMF to go ahead and bring these reforms. It was not obligatory, forceful. I mean, it was not voluntary. Forceful था कि हमें करना पड़ा. We had to go ahead and do this. So write down. In many countries, economic reforms were voluntary. Initiated by the government by choice. In India's case, however, the 1991 reform were obligatory. Obligatory means involuntary. It was forceful. हमें ये करके हमें करना ही पड़ा, right? These were obligatory in nature. Right? Why? So they were because of severe balance of payment crisis and IMF pressure. Because of the balance of payment crisis and IMF pressure, India sought financial assistance from International Monetary Fund under its extended fund facility, EFF program, right? Under the extended fund facility program. IMF's financial help came with conditions. IMF ने clear बोला, IMF clearly said that if you want to get money from us, if you want loan from us, if you want help from us, then this can only be given to you if you agree to certain conditions. अगर आप हमारी कुछ बातें मानोगे. And what those certain conditions were? Those certain conditions basically were these conditions that there had to be mandatory economic reforms that you had to bring in. So what were those conditions? Conditions were beta mandatory economic measures to be fulfilled by India in exchange for foreign currency support. In exchange for foreign currency support. These conditions were not predefined, but were custom designed by IMF for each crisis hit country. IMF ने हर कंट्री के लिए जो भी कंट्री में क्राइसिस आता था, according to the country, according to the customizations, IMF would bring certain policies, right? That you have to do this, only then we will help you. So we understand that India voluntarily didn't want at that point privatization or globalization or liberalization, but India was forced to bring privatization or globalization or liberalization. Okay, beta. Now let's talk about nature of India's reforms. Nature of India's reforms. The reforms India implemented were not originally formulated domestically nor mandated by the public. So as I told you that we had a lot of opposition to the economic reforms. बहुत लोग इसके against थे, बहुत opposition था इसके लिए. And at the same time, ये domestically भी form नहीं हुए थे. As I told you, this were given by IMF as a condition to give the loan. ठीक है. However, many Indian economists and policymakers have been advocating similar reform since 1970s and 1980s, arguing India needs to liberalize to improve efficiency. थोड़ा समझते हैं बेटा that वैसे तो ये reforms obligatory थे, they were non-voluntary, हाँ, we were forced to follow them, but many economists, बहुत सारे economists, बहुत सारे policy maker 1970s and 1980s जब बाकी जगहों पे open economy में conversions आ रहे थे, so many economists were suggesting since 1970s and 1980s that we should liberalize, हमें भी liberalize करना चाहिए अपनी efficiency को improve करने के लिए. We should also be liberalizing, right? So write down the Rao Manmohan Singh government 1991 is credited with launching reforms because it politically implemented these long debated measures. Right. So this step that they had taken, ये बहुत ही modern step था. Right. Basically, at this point, what happened was that many people, many businessmen, क्योंकि देखो जैसी इकोनॉमी ओपन होगी तो there will be competition from outside world, right? And when there will be competition from outside world, you will suffer, आपका demand suffer होगा. So many businessmen, many consumer, many firms, many the parties, many political issues were raised when these reforms were brought into place, right? But still, it was a very politically bold step, okay? Because you were going ahead and you were selling the state owned enterprises, our public sector enterprises को sell off कर रहे थे, right? And in India, during that period, the state enterprises or the public sector firms, हाँ, जो भी public sector units थे, public sector enterprises थे, public sector undertakings थी, PSUs थे, they were considered as the temple of modern India. उनको temple of modern India बोला जाता था, right? So, in a way, the government sector was given a lot of importance. Now, ड्यूरिंग दैट पीरियड जहां पे गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर को इतना इंपॉर्टेंस दिया जाता है, जहां पे पब्लिक सेक्टर अंडरटेकिंग को टेम्पल ऑफ मॉडर्न इंडिया बोला जाता है, टू गो अहेड एंड टू सेल दैट, to sell those public sector undertaking to the private sector, right? To privatize, right? That was a very bold step politically. बहुत ही एक strong step था politically बात करें तो, right? Now, when Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was the finance minister, when he presented the 1991 budget, India's foreign exchange reserves were so low that it could barely pay for 2 weeks of import. इतने कम थे कि सिर्फ 2 हफ्ते का काम बन रहा था. Before announcing the reforms, government secretly pledged India's gold reserves, that means 47 tons, which were sent to the Bank of England and Bank of Japan to secure emergency loan. उन्होंने 47 ton gold. And there is a video, you can look at that video. If you Google online, आपको वो video मिलेगी. Where it showed कि कैसे वो loan जो है वो sorry, कैसे वो gold जो है it flied from India, right? So 47 tons of gold was sent to Bank of England and Bank of Japan to secure emergency loan, right? And this was kept hidden from the public to avoid panic. ठीक है, just consider it like a usual family. हाँ, अगर एक family में कभी financial crisis आता है, so what is the first thing that we do? We sell off the gold, and we use the gold to secure some money, right, and get out of the trouble. Same is the case with the country as a whole. So we pledged India's gold reserves, we sent them to Bank of England, we sent them to Bank of Japan, and we secured emergency loan, right? While the IMF conditions triggered liberalization, the blueprint was never blindly copied. ठीक है, IMF ने बोला कि अब लिबरलाइजेशन लेकर आओ तभी लोन मिलेगा, हाँ, bring in LPG policies. But Manmohan Singh must be admired for it that he and his economic team, they crafted an Indian version of liberalization and didn't follow that, didn't copy it blindly. एकदम जो IMF ने बोला सब नहीं कर दिया, हाँ, उसको उन्होंने इंडिया का एक वर्जन क्रिएट किया जिसमें कॉशियस, ग्रेजुअल एंड सोशली अवेयर measures लेके आए गए, right? So they did open the market, they did bring liberalization, but they did not dismantle welfare programs, right? They brought it gradually, right? It was a gradualism approach. Okay? It was not a shock therapy जैसे ईस्टर्न यूरोप में हुआ था, that it was a shock therapy, immediately चीजें हो गई. It's not like that, right? They gradually took the path of LPG, right? So India had a very unique reform path, right? PV Narasimha Rao, although he was a political veteran, he was the PM, he went ahead and he gave a political cover to the reform. ठीक है, उन्होंने सिंह को प्राइवेटली बोला था, डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह को, that you do whatever is necessary, I'll handle the politics, right? This combination of PV Narasimha Rao and Dr. Manmohan Singh, it was a very deadly combination, a very rare combination in Indian politics. हाँ, तो जो जो उन्होंने एक फ्रीडम दिया अपने फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर को टू हैंडल थिंग्स हिज वे, दैट वाज वेरी गुड, right? So in the budget speech, Manmohan Singh, he quoted Victor Hugo, right? No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come. जिस चीज का समय आ गया है उसको होने से कोई नहीं रोक सकता, right? The idea was India's economic freedom, right? It was making a shift from state socialism to market driven economy. हम एक state ड्रिवन इकोनॉमी थे जहां पे गवर्नमेंट का बहुत हैवी रोल था, और उससे हम एक ऐसी इकोनॉमी में आ रहे थे जहां पे प्राइवेट सेक्टर का बहुत रोल होने वाला था, मार्केट का रोल होने वाला था, ठीक है? और ये आइडिया क्या था? इंडिया के इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम का। और उन्होंने क्लियरली कोट किया कि नो पावर ऑन अर्थ कैन स्टॉप एन आइडिया whose time has come. अगर किसी चीज का समय आ गया है तो उसको कोई भी रोक नहीं सकता है, right? Ironically, the biggest reform in India had no political consensus. जो मैं आपको बार बार बोल रही हूँ, that there was a lot of issues politically, बहुत ज्यादा opposition में problems आ रही थी, opposition, trade union, part of own government also opposed it. Yet, Rao and Singh pushed the reforms quietly, avoided any grand announcement, and let the policies like industrial delicensing, like foreign investment, like tax simplification slowly reshape the economy. उन्होंने उसको समय दिया कि धीरे 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 डी लाइसेंसिंग, पहले लाइसेंस राज था, डी लाइसेंसिंग, फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट्स का आना, टैक्स को सिंप्लीफाई करना, slowly it will happen and it will reshape the economy. We are not going to make any grand announcement, right? And within few years we saw that this was actually a very good policy. बहुत अच्छा पॉलिसी था ये. Why? Because India's foreign reserves tripled within a few years, right? Inflation अपने आप कंट्रोल में आ गया. GDP climbed to 6 to 7%. हाँ, you know, right? We talk about the golden era 2002 से 2008. There is a very famous paper written on that era, which talks about this phase of golden era of 2002 to 2007, 2008, right? So GDP growth rate climbed up, right? India gained credibility with the global investors. FDI flew in very much. Foreign direct investments बहुत high हो गए. Now if we look back, जहां पे बहुत ज्यादा opposition था, now these 1991 reforms, they are called as the second independence of India. ठीक है? That is called as the economic freedom. जो हमें पहले मिला, that was the political independence, but the economic independence only came in 1991. Is it clear? So, okay, coming back to what I was saying here, I deviated a lot. So we were talking about obligatory and non-obligatory policies, and we were appreciating that how the government brought in a politically bold step, and it privatized the public sector undertaking, also called as the temple of modern India. Okay, okay, write it with me. Doing so was politically bold, since selling or closing state owned enterprises in a country where they are considered temples of modern India. Hmm, was deeply unpopular. Right. Now let's talk about the political reaction. Better. The 1991 reform faced intense criticism from political spectrum. First, you had problem with opposition parties. Then you had problem with trade unions. Then you had problem with left wing group. Then you had problem with business houses. Then you had problem with media, problem with general public, and in fact own party also. अपने ही party के लोग भी साथ नहीं दे रहे थे, right? So many accused government of bowing to IMF dictates, foreign power, एंड एमएनसी। तो बहुत लोगों ने बोला कि गवर्नमेंट डर गई है, वो सिर्फ आईएमएफ के जो आईएमएफ बोल रहा है वो कर रही है, अपना खुद का कुछ उसको नहीं सोच रही है, उनको कंप्लीटली गवर्नमेंट उनके अंडर आ चुकी है। ठीक है। इवन टुडे मेनी पीपल still show their skepticism, saying that they did not do the right thing, they bowed to the external power, right? So what is important here, what I want to highlight here, is that India lacked political consensus. Politically, हमें सबका साथ नहीं मिल रहा था, and India lacked the maturity on economic reforms. So, माने no one was there who was supporting the then reforms, right? And उस टाइम पे क्या हुआ ना, there were some emotional issues also जो आने शुरू हो गए, like religion, like caste, right? Which often overshadowed the economic understanding. लोगों के बीच में ये भर दिया गया that this is going to benefit a particular religion, a particular caste, a particular level of the people, right? Level of the society. And therefore, it even further slowed down the public acceptance. इसकी वजह से और ज्यादा ऐसा हो गया कि public जो है, they were not accepting to these reforms. Is that clear? So there was a lack of political